Welcome, everyone. Before we jump in, this deep dive is brought to you by AI Opportune.
Yeah, a great resource.
Truly, if you are looking for the absolute go-to resource for practical insights on exactly how artificial intelligence is reshaping industries, redefining products, and shifting competitive advantage, this is for you.
Highly recommend it.
I strongly encourage you to subscribe to AI Opportune to ensure you are always staying ahead of the curve. You really do not want to navigate this space without it. So with that said, let's get right into our mission for today.
Let's do it.
We are unpacking a truly fascinating document that we managed to get our hands on. It is called the Final Draft 2026 Gemini Android Guide.
It's quite a read.
It is. And if you're all interested in technology, software, or just how the digital world is built, we're looking at a fundamental shift in software development happening right now in early 2026.
Right.
We are entirely past the era where AI was just about faster typing. What this document details is the total collapse of what they call the idea to deployment timeline.
Yeah, that timeline is just vanishing.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the scale of what we're dealing with here is hard to wrap your head around at first glance.
It really is. The raw Google AI market data provided in this guide paints a picture of an industry that has transformed almost overnight. I mean, in January of 2026 alone, the total Gemini API volume hit 85 billion requests.
85 billion.
Billion, with a B. That is 85 billion times developers called on this intelligence in a single month. And that represents a 142% year-over-year increase.
That is just massive.
We really have to pause and consider what that volume actually means. This isn't experimental tinkering in a sandbox anymore. It tells you unequivocally that AI-augmented engineering has become the absolute industry standard.
Right.
If you are building software and you aren't integrating these workflows, you're effectively operating in an obsolete paradigm.
I want to dig into that paradigm shift, because that is the core of this document, right? What Gemini and Android Studio actually is now. I think a lot of people, maybe even you listening right now, might still have this mental model of AI coding as a really smart autocomplete.
Yeah, a lot of people still view it that way.
You know, like a superpowered spell checker on your phone that tries to guess the next word you want to type.
Yeah.
But this guide makes it clear we are moving toward what they call agentic workflows.
The agentic workflow, yes.
Instead of a spell checker, Gemini is now an integrated AI development agent. And it operates with what the source calls full project awareness.
Right, and full project awareness is the differentiator here. It's what separates a novelty tool from a structural dependency.
How so?
Well, legacy autocomplete tools, even the highly praised ones from a couple of years ago, were inherently limited by their context window.
Right, they could only see so much.
Exactly. They could look at the few dozen lines of code you are currently typing and maybe guess the next function. But they were blind to the broader architecture. Gemini in Android Studio understands the deep semantic relationships across your entire code base. It knows how your user interface code in one folder interacts with your backend logic files in another folder, and how all of that relates to your specific build configurations.
Wow.
It possesses a holistic understanding of the application architecture.
So it's not just looking at a brick, it's looking at the entire blueprint of the house.
That's a great way to put it.
That brings us to the specific capabilities broken down in the guide. And the first one that really caught my attention is agent mode.
Oh yeah, agent mode is huge.
The guide describes this as a self-correcting engine. And I'm trying to picture this in practice. If I have a notoriously painful engineering task, like refactoring a massive legacy module that has been touched in 3 years, how is it actually planning and executing that across multiple files?
Historically, refactoring legacy code is tedious, error-prone work. It requires a developer to manually trace dependencies across dozens of files, carefully updating each one and just sort of hoping nothing breaks.
Yeah, the classic developer headache.
Right. But in agent mode, you give the system a natural language prompt. You literally tell it, in plain English, what architectural change you want to make. The agent then creates a plan and begins modifying multiple files across the project.
Wait, let me pause you right there.
Sure.
Giving an AI the reins to rewrite dozens of interconnected files in a legacy system sounds terrifying. I mean, how do we know it's not introducing a massive hallucinated vulnerability that we won't catch until it's too late?
That is exactly why the self-correcting aspect is the focal point here. It doesn't just write the code and walk away.
Okay.
As it modifies those files, it compiles and tests its own work in the background. If it hits a snag, say a variable conflict or a broken dependency, it iterates.
It fixes its own mistakes.
Yes. It reads the error, understands why its previous attempt failed, and fixes the code without human intervention. The guide notes that this capability now automates 90% of manual refactoring in legacy projects.
90%. That alone is a game changer for anyone drowning in technical debt.
Excellent.
But let's move from fixing old code to building new things, specifically the multimodal UI prototyping. Here's where it gets really interesting.
This is my favorite part.
The guide outlines how developers can take a literal design screenshot or a wireframe, and Gemini converts that directly into functional Jetpack Compose code.
It's practically magic.
And for those who aren't deeply entrenched in Android development, Jetpack Compose is basically the modern toolkit developers use to build the actual native user interface. The buttons, the layouts, the visual elements you interact with on your screen. So just so I'm clear, I feed it a picture of a UI, and it writes the Compose code to build it.
It does. It removes the entire friction point of translation between design and development.
That's wild.
Historically, a designer creates a beautiful mock-up in a tool like Figma. Then a front-end developer has to spend hours, sometimes days, manually translating those visual elements into code, tweaking padding, colors, and alignments to painstakingly match the picture.
The pixel-pushing phase.
Exactly. Now, the multimodal intelligence of Gemini can literally see the image, understand the spatial relationships between the UI components, and generate the corresponding Compose code instantly.
I'm just thinking about the back and forth this eliminates. No more designers sending angry Slack messages because the developer made a button 3 pixels too far to the left.
It entirely redefines that relationship. The translation phase is essentially automated, allowing both designers and engineers to focus on the user experience rather than pixel pushing.
Once that code is written, though, you still have to make sure it doesn't crash.
Right.
Which brings us to the third key capability, automated debugging. The guide mentions direct integration with Logcat and app quality insights. Let's quickly translate that for the listener.
Good idea.
Logcat, for anyone who doesn't spend their life staring at Android Studio, is basically the command center where you see all the background system messages. It's that endless matrix of scrolling text where developers hunt for the exact line of code that caused the app to crash.
A very stressful scrolling text.
Exactly. But the guide emphasizes that this AI integration is proactive, not reactive.
Traditional debugging is almost entirely reactive. An app crashes, the user gets frustrated, maybe they leave a 1-star review, and then the developer digs into Logcat to piece together the autopsy of what went wrong.
Right.
What Gemini is doing through this deep integration is analyzing the code and the live logs to predict and resolve crashes before they ever reach the production environment.
So it's catching things on the fly.
Exactly. It spots the vulnerabilities and the memory leaks while the app is still being built. It's like having a dedicated quality assurance engineer reviewing every single keystroke in real time, anticipating failure points and patching them before the code is even merged.
Anyone who has ever spent a Friday night at 2 a.m. hunting down a memory leak right before a major product launch will understand the emotional weight of that.
Oh, definitely.
But when you eliminate those late-night fire drills where the engineering team is ripping their hair out over a crash log, You're not just saving developers' sanity, you are saving massive amounts of time.
Time and money.
Right. And time, in the tech world, is market share, which is a perfect way to look at the business strategy pivot in this document. We've been deep in the engineering trenches, but if we connect this to the bigger picture, the guide points out a specific metric that stands out on the macro level. 58% of companies are increasing their AI investments this year.
And the motivation behind that 58% is what we really need to focus on.
Okay.
For a long time, the narrative around AI in the enterprise was primarily about cost cutting. Boardrooms were asking, how do we automate jobs to save money?
Right, efficiency through reduction.
Exactly. But the guide is very explicit that the primary goal for business leaders in 2026 is no longer just cost reduction. It is velocity.
Velocity.
It's about how incredibly fast you can move from a strategic idea in a meeting to a functional deployed feature in a user's hands.
Velocity over cost cutting. And the early adoption metrics from 2025 to 2026 back that up heavily. The guide points out that AI-augmented squads are achieving up to 55% higher productivity.
50.
Yeah, they included a case study about the company Pocket FM that really grounds this concept.
Yeah.
Pocket FM reported a 50% savings in development time. They achieve that specifically by using these agentic workflows we just talked about to handle all the repetitive boilerplate code and the complex refactoring.
Massive.
If you are leading a development team and suddenly your development cycles are cut in half, you are shipping twice as much product with the same exact headcount.
This raises an important consideration for you, the listener, especially if you work in a smaller organization. Imagine being on a lean, agile team trying to compete with tech giants.
It is tough.
It is. In the past, small teams often had to sacrifice certain enterprise-grade best practices simply because they didn't have the manpower or the highly specialized senior engineers to enforce them constantly.
You just have to ship.
Right. The source material describes this phenomenon as the democratization of technical excellence. These AI-native platforms effectively act as a senior architect for those smaller teams. The AI is constantly enforcing enterprise-grade best practices in code quality and security across the entire stack.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
Are we saying a startup in a garage with this tool suddenly has the identical structural integrity of a company with thousands of senior engineers?
Yeah.
Doesn't the human experience of a 20-year veteran still count for something?
The 20-year veteran's experience counts immensely for architectural vision and solving truly novel problems.
Okay.
What the AI is democratizing is the baseline execution. You don't need that 20-year veteran to spend their valuable time ensuring basic code is secure, scalable, and adheres to standard formatting.
Because the AI does it.
Exactly. The agent is ensuring that baseline of excellence for you automatically. It elevates the floor of what a small team can reliably produce without introducing catastrophic technical debt.
Speaking of technical debt and security, we have to talk about what the guide calls a critical trend for 2026. The rise of on-device intelligence.
Oh, this is a massive shift.
We are moving toward privacy-first AI. The guide details how developers can use the ML-Kit GenAI Prompt API to embed Gemini Nano directly into their Android apps. To demystify that alphabet soup a bit for everyone, the ML-Kit API is essentially the software bridge that allows the app you are building to talk directly to the AI models running locally on the phone's hardware.
Right.
This feels like a massive pivot away from the trend of running everything on giant centralized cloud servers.
It is a profound architectural shift. For the past few years, if you wanted to run a powerful generative AI model, you had to send the user's data up to the cloud, process it on massive server farms, and send the result back down to the phone.
Which takes time.
Time, yes. That introduces two severe bottlenecks: latency and privacy. By embedding Gemini Nano directly into the Android app via that ML-Kit API, the app can run complex generative features locally, right on the silicon of the user's phone.
Meaning things like real-time sentiment analysis or summarizing a long, sensitive document happen right there on the physical device in your hand, entirely bypassing the cloud.
Exactly. And by bypassing the cloud, you guarantee zero latency performance because you aren't waiting on a network connection or a server response.
Instantaneous.
More importantly, you adhere strictly to rigorous privacy standards like GDPR compliance. The user's personal data never leaves their physical device. In an era where data privacy is paramount and regulatory scrutiny is at an all-time high, this capability is invaluable.
The guide goes on to show how rapid industry innovation is springing up specifically because of this on-device tech. Let's look at how different sectors are actually using this, starting with health tech.
A great example.
The guide highlights how medical apps are using Gemini Nano for on-device local data processing to rapidly iterate on patient interfaces. We are talking about HIPAA compliance here. When you are dealing with sensitive medical records, total data sovereignty isn't a nice-to-have feature, it's a strict legal requirement.
The liability involved in sending raw patient data to a public cloud for AI processing is astronomical. Having the AI model operate locally on the device solves that completely. The data stays with the patient.
Another fascinating example from the guide is in fintech. We are seeing financial institutions securely prototyping and deploying entirely new biometric authentication flows. The crazy part is they're doing this in mere days.
We really need to contextualize why doing this in days is so revolutionary.
Yeah, please do.
Historically, if a bank wanted to implement a new feature involving facial recognition or fingerprint data, and that data had to touch a cloud server for AI analysis, it triggered months of compliance checks, security audits, and regulatory red tape.
Which slows everything down.
Exactly. The risk of intercepting biometric data in transit is simply too high. By processing that biometric authentication locally with on-device AI, they bypass the majority of that regulatory nightmare. The velocity we discussed earlier is directly tied to avoiding those cloud compliance bottlenecks.
That makes perfect sense. The engineering shift directly accelerates the business deployment by removing the bureaucratic hurdles.
Precisely.
And it's not just the highly regulated industries experiencing this. Look at retail. The guide notes that retail apps are utilizing AI-powered localization to translate and adapt their app strings for global markets at near zero cost.
Localization is notoriously expensive and slow. It's not just translating words, it's adapting the layout for languages that read right to left, or adjusting cultural nuances in the text.
Right. It's a whole process.
When that translation and cultural adaptation are handled dynamically by the on-device AI, the barrier to entry for international markets essentially disappears. A retailer can instantly customize the language and the layout of their app for a user in Tokyo versus a user in London dynamically, without having to maintain dozens of separate code bases for different regions.
It fundamentally changes the economics of scaling a product globally. It's wild to think about the cascading effects of all this.
It really is.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today, from the nitty-gritty of how we used to manually hunt for bugs to the global business implications of bypassing cloud compliance. I'm trying to pull all of this together. So if you had to distill this entire 2026 Gemini guide into the absolute most critical points for the listener, what are we really looking at?
If we synthesize the core themes of this document, there are 3 absolute takeaways you need to internalize. First, mass enterprise adoption is not a future prediction, it is our current reality.
Right, the 85 billion requests.
Exactly. That volume in January 2026 proves that AI-augmented development is the established, undeniable norm. Second, the fundamental metric of success in the software industry has shifted from cost-cutting to velocity. By automating refactoring and boilerplate through agentic workflows, companies are drastically reducing their time to market, realizing up to 50% savings in development time.
And third,
finally, on-device models like Gemini Nano are establishing the new gold standard for high-privacy industries. By running advanced AI locally, we are solving the latency and compliance issues that previously held back rapid innovation in sectors like healthcare and finance.
it is a completely new world for software, and honestly, it's incredibly exciting to watch it unfold. Before we wrap up, I want to quickly remind you that this deep dive was brought to you by AI Opportune.
Great platform.
If you want to keep making sense of these massive shifts, and more importantly, learn how to apply them to your own work and strategy, you really need to subscribe to AI Opportune. It is the absolute best resource out there for practical insights into how AI is reshaping industries and giving smart companies their competitive advantage. Make sure you check them out and subscribe.
As we close out today's discussion, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, one that extends beyond the immediate code and compliance issues we've discussed today.
Let's hear it.
We've spent this time exploring how AI agents are now stepping into the role of our senior architects. They are the ones writing the bulk of the code, proactively predicting our software crashes, and meticulously enforcing our highest security standards. If that is our new reality, what becomes the true, irreplaceable value of the human software engineer in the years to come? Will the act of coding become less about the rote memorization of syntax and the manual typing of brackets, and entirely about the pure, unadulterated imagination of deciding what to build next?
That is a brilliant question to end on, and it really makes you rethink the whole concept of what a developer actually is moving forward. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today and for bringing your curiosity. We love unpacking this stuff with you. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.